Hello, welcome to the Beliefs Bazaar. My name is Alex, and welcome to all the UFO enthusiasts out there. This video is for you guys. In fact, I am one of you, so this video is really cool, I guess, because it's my first foray into this field on YouTube, but I've been an enthusiast for a while. So anyway, this is take a little shot of liquid courage because I'm still kind of nervous to do these videos, but this is to all the UFO enthusiasts out there. Oh yeah. All right. Well, hopefully that takes the edge off because, yeah, unlike my other content, which is mostly, I focus a lot about politics, but it's the content I make. I try to focus on beliefs and what kind of mindset allows people to enter into certain spaces. And the UFO community is no exception. This is a field wrought with various beliefs, and a whole spectrum of how serious people take it, from completely fanatical to very skeptic to completely dismissive. So there's a wide range. And so, before I get into it, I have a couple things that I'd like to talk about or suggest or even contribute, I guess, to the conversation. Excuse me. But the first thing I'd like to do is discuss a little bit about what I see the hazard with this endeavor, I guess, this field of inquiry. And, just to start off, I suppose, I should say that I am myself, like I said, I'm a pretty big UFO and alien enthusiast, I guess. It's one of those things, I study beliefs in general, but the UFO topic is what's fascinating to me is that it seems like it's kind of the amount that I believe in it is directly proportional to how much time I spend looking into it, because there's some very compelling stuff out there. And, I honestly, it's one of those things. I personally have a hard time fully believing anything because it eventually becomes an article of faith when we can't just hold the thing, or there's certainly a lot more evidence for this than some other things, but still, it's not an open and shut case, at least for me yet. And I'll get into the reasons why. Actually, in a little bit, I'll get into the reasons why. But I'd like to say first that when you align yourself with any belief, you close yourself off to things outside of that belief sometimes. And in this case, I worry that the UFO community is vulnerable to the kind of influence that we really don't want. And that kind of stems from the idea of, when you believe something, and especially if you identify with that belief system or with the people that believe that system, you put yourself at risk to have bad actors and stuff use that belief system or your enthusiasm for it to manipulate you in other ways. And in this context, I think, recently during this last election, I heard a lot of people in the UFO community talking about the promises that the current administration was making during their campaign. And if you're watching this video in the future, it's April 13th, 2025 right now. So, excuse me, we're about 6 months, 6 months out from the last election and about, 3 months out from the inauguration itself. So anyway, the administration made various promises about what kind of information they'd be releasing. And I honestly think that distracted some people from thinking about the grander picture politically and just kind of ignored a lot of things for the sake of like their desire to get this truth. And, I, like many people, were very skeptical that any administration will disclose to the level that we want. So, even if they made the promise and kept it, that they would release this information, I don't think that is worth our livelihood as the working class. I don't think it's worth the possibility that we'll never get health care for everybody. These are kind of things that we need to think about in the grander scheme when faced with decisions like voting for a political candidate. We can't get lost in the sauce about, who's going to reveal what and aligning with them for the only for the sake of getting the information that we want so much, or to be validated. That's really important to a lot of people, especially experiencers, which, I wouldn't necessarily consider myself an experiencer because I haven't had kind of one of the classic experiences. However, I have had an experience while on psychedelics that I would actually class as an experience in the context of non-human intelligence, I guess we should say. So I'll get into that in another video for sure, because I think that I'd like some feedback and possibly interaction with other experiencers about this thing. But I'll talk about that another time. What it comes down to, though, is I am now, might have a tendency to align with someone who might validate my experience and give me some kind of information that I seek, So we have to be really careful that people aren't using that as a smokescreen to trick us into aligning with something nefarious that we actually don't want. But, so that is to say, if I had one option was to find out everything, the whole truth about aliens, whatever that is, on one hand, and the thing that I had to give up was, our freedom, or maybe allow a fascist regime to take power, or justice and democracy for everyone on the other hand, and I'll never find out. I would choose the latter, as much as that would pain me to say that I'll never find out. It's just better for everyone. So, we can't be selfish in our desires for truth, even if it eludes us. We still need to be considerate to the rest of the human population that exists now around you. Okay. So that's kind of really how I feel about that. That is not to say that we shouldn't look into these things. I am not saying that at all. In fact, I encourage everyone to enthusiastically look into anything that you're interested in. Look into anything that doesn't make sense, ask questions, but just be careful who you align with politically as a result of this curiosity. Okay, because they can really sneak things by us if we're really focused on one issue, And it's not just aliens. If you're really focused on any number of conspiratorial topics, or even just one thing, like I don't know, pick a topic. I didn't want to get specific because that might single out some people or whatever. So whatever you I'm sure anyone watching this knows someone or is someone that might vote because of one major issue or even one specific issue. And if that's the case, I strongly suggest that you consider the grander picture. And then the other thing I'd like to say about this specifically is, I guess, sorry. Right. Right. The fact that there is so much disinformation and contradictory information, I suspect and worry that there is influence from either the government or, the government, but, or just even private companies that work with the government on secret projects and stuff. These are the people that put out propaganda and whatnot, I would be shocked if the UFO community isn't rife with government agents. And I think their goal would be to just neutralize us politically. And they would do that by creating such an environment of, just so much, flooding the zone with all this bullshit that we just don't trust anybody. Or, because the government has been hiding this information from us, whether or not it's aliens or just, a smokescreen for their secret projects, both of those things mean that they've been lying to us about a lot of stuff, or some pretty serious things. One of them, probably the most significant thing to humanity ever, would be confirmation of extra life elsewhere, or just finding out that the entire thing has been bullshit. And, the truth is probably somewhere in between, but just the idea that the government has been lying to us, whatever, we know that. And so, we can't get lost on that sentiment and just decide that all government bad, right? There's going to be people that are better candidates for us. There's people that are more concerned about justice and democracy and you and my well-being and our economic, success. And then there's people that just want to turn us against each other, keep us fighting, keep us, angry and distracted. And that is what we need to be careful about. Don't let ourselves get, turned off from other things because we're just convinced that everyone involved with the government has to be in on it and lying and this, that, and the other thing. There is definitely different facets of the government. As you know, there's the military, which has pretty good, a lot of independence, and, they don't have to, things are classified, I guess what I was trying to say. I don't know how I was trying to say that, but, the classification of things means that most elected officials aren't even privy to a lot of these things. It's, very classified and held in, certain sections of our military. And that is not to say that the rest of the government is capable or even, lying to us to that extent. Now, that being said, I think most of them are full of shit, and that's because of the money that's involved in politics. It doesn't have to do with what kind of secrets they're hiding. It has to do with the kind of influence that money has in politics, and that's a whole nother discussion. I just want to say, please don't dismiss everyone and everything involved with the government, big umbrella term, the government, because some parts of it have been lying to us about things that we care about. All right. So I guess that is kind of my friendly warning to the rest of the UFO community is please be mindful of the beliefs you have and how they close you off from listening to other people. I guess that was the other thing too, is don't close yourself off from hearing someone out because they don't agree with you or at all about the UFO topic. A lot of people might have to come around to that, and that's okay. But because they're dismissive of it now, it doesn't mean they shouldn't be listened to at all. Because certain politicians won't delve into the topic or don't want to discuss it really because it might be kind of a third rail issue. Don't dismiss them outright. I think UFO disclosure should be a separate issue from other political issues and should not affect our voting. So there's that. All right. Some of the problems I have with how the UFO community is going about things is that, let me see here. Yeah, it seemed, this last summer in 2024, there was some hearings, or it might have been in the fall. I don't remember specifically, but either way, over the last several years, since 2017, I guess, is when kind of there was a big reveal or whatever, some videos came out. Excuse me. So anyway, some videos came out, and since then, there's been a number of hearings in the government or in the Congress, and it kind of just, there's journalists and there's whistleblowers and stuff, and it kind of just, I was sitting there listening, I don't know if I was watching or listening to a podcast version of it, but either way, I was listening to it and listening to the commentary afterwards, and I'm like, okay, so what is this happening right now? We've got journalists and government employees the whistleblowers that come out and speak to journalists who are then speaking to elected officials in the government in a congressional hearing and asking them to then go to the military and reveal secrets to the people that are asking the government to reveal the secrets that the government is keeping from us. That seems kind of silly to me. Like, what motivation are the elected officials going to send a strongly worded letter to the military to be like, release the stuff? I mean, that's essentially what's been happening. And they, kind of dish out at this slow pace, nothing really conclusive. And then we get a bunch of really crappy, grainy videos when they claim to have 4K, lots of video of lots of things. It's just, it seems like that is what we are being directed to do, like I'll use the Matrix as an example because people love that. So in this second one, right? So the red pill, freed Neo from being in the, actually in the Matrix, and then he's out. But then they had the Oracle and Morpheus's goal, with the Oracle and stuff. And that just kind of, it was, they were the ones asking too many questions. So then they were, given the secret information and then led down a path that eventually would have mostly led to them doing a specific thing that everyone kind of who is freed from the system ends up doing, right? So, that was kind of a roundabout way to say that I think that they are guiding us to do the thing that wastes the most of our time. And you could say that there's progress being made here and there, but is that because of the efforts of people, filing FOIAs and, bringing these things up, or, this trickle of whistleblowers that comes out every now and then and says a thing, and then we all, are like, is this real? Is this not? What, that seems to me like a very directed thing. Like, we are being kind of funneled into this path of, just a very directed path that really only reveals as much as they feel like revealing at any given time. And, I feel like the whistleblowers are nothing more than just, those are people that come out as planned to release specific information at a specific time to kind of keep us on, keep us strung along on this fucking path. I don't know. It just seems really, I don't know. It just doesn't seem very productive. And the things that come out are never really that conclusive. They either have the information or they don't. I mean, what are we doing here with that? It just seems really like we're just spinning our wheels. I don't know. All right. The other thing, the UFO community is really like icked out. I don't know. They're really hesitant to talk about genetic experimentation. And why that is, I don't know. But that seems to me like, I don't know. I listen to some podcasts. There's a lot of people in the community that just won't approach the topic. I know there's been a couple books that speculate on the genetic experiments that our government may or may not have done. But I don't understand why everyone is so quick to dismiss that. You think that with all our billionaires and these people that are like afraid to die, including, I'm afraid to die. But these people that think that they can use their money and resources to prevent their own death and stuff. Do you think those people aren't doing genetic experiments with humans? All this stuff that's been like outsourced to privatized companies. Do you think they're not doing genetic experiments to see what and how we can manipulate the human genome and whatnot? I frankly just don't believe that that's not happening. So, that's, and that brings me, I guess, to my next point. Like with the technology, for me to make the leap to this is non-human technology, I need to know what the capabilities of humans are first. I particularly am fond of like older stories and even what little like videos, but older stories that happened at a time when we just did not have the technology, or even, before, like back when there was like horses and carriages, or, other things, or even like in the biblical age, like there's plenty of stories that, a lot of people say that the stories about angels in various religious texts are, at the time, whatever their time version, how they would describe a UFO, with the modern, or with the language of the time, how they might describe a UFO if they saw one, So those are kind of the stories I find more compelling, just because we don't have the technology, or humans definitely did not have the technology at the time to have craft that were flying around, much less the way we think they do, which is non-traditional propulsion, non-chemical propulsion, either gravity or some sort of electromagnetic form of propulsion. So, until I know the actual capabilities of humanity, I am skeptical at best, or, I'm just skeptical, and I am, it's a stretch not knowing the capabilities, the maximum capabilities of human technology, for me to really believe that any of these things flying around the sky are not human made, and do I think that they would test secret things on unknowing Air Force pilots and Navy pilots? Absolutely. Who else would they test it on? We're not going to test it on, well, maybe they do test it in other countries, but, in case something happened, they would want it to be on our turf, So a lot of those like pilot, military pilots and stuff, I absolutely believe their stories, their encounters. But do I believe that it was not also U.S. technology? Not necessarily. There'd have to be, again, I just have to know the peak of our capabilities before I'd believe anything flying around the sky is not ours. Right. Okay. So I did say at the beginning that I had maybe something interesting to add to the UFO conversation, and I do. I think I do anyway. So, when we think about alien contact, we think about a ship, or, a lot of times a being, like another entity from another far off place comes here on a ship. This is the nuts and bolts UFO craft theory, or UFO alien theory, is the, what people refer to as the nuts and bolts, physical objects, physical beings coming here from another place in technology that we don't understand. I like that. Excuse me. I like that. That's kind of the one I want to be happening, whether they can, this, what we call dimensional travel, that might be, the ability to kind of transcend matter, if you will. Whether or not, when people talk about dimensions, I don't know, that can cover a lot of ground sometimes. Like, we're not necessarily talking about, what we think of as 1, 2, and 3-dimensional space, and, maybe like time being sometimes what we consider dimension. But, it's not necessarily from a different dimension of physical reality, I don't think. When people say that, I think they also kind of mean like the ability to maybe shift between, matter, or, some kind of frequency-based existence. I don't know. So, that is fascinating to me as well. The ability that more advanced civilizations may have the ability to travel in a different way, outside of what we consider space-time, and that might appear to us as like interdimensional, when really they're just utilizing a aspect of reality that we're not familiar with yet. So that is really intriguing to me too. The thing that I wanted to bring up about those things is what, again, we have these kind of like very large ideas of what contact would be, like it'll be a ship appearing to us, or flying from out of the solar system to land on Earth, or just appear, phase shift from another place, or another, space, time, or what have you. but it's always kind of that, or receiving like a signal that we would pick up on our like telescopes, or on our antennas and all of that. But so essentially, like, what are the parameters? What do we expect to happen? What do we consider even influence? Is influence like, again, like a ship flying down and landing in your yard, and a being getting out? Like, is that the parameters that you require to decide that we have been contacted by aliens? Or we think about signals. Signals come in, it'll be a radio transmission or a microwave transmission, something to that effect, that we'll be able to pick up and then decode. But what if it is not that? What if it is actually something like as simple as a wave, not just a signal, but like a wave that might affect our cognition, or even, like if you've read the book Three Body Problem, that series, it's fantastic. If you haven't, I recommend it. And I don't think it's really, it's not really a spoiler to talk about this because it's really early in the books, but in that book, species outside of our, another species, it's a first contact story. They send a single proton from a far distance away because it's a lot easier to send a proton than it is a ship, right? So if you have a higher level of technology, when we talk about like the Kardashev scale, like level 1 to whatever civilizations, like that also comes with the ability to manipulate the subatomic structure, or on the quantum level things, right? So in that story, the other species has the ability to manipulate a proton such that it is essentially a computer, or like a operating system or whatever. And they send a proton because even humans can accelerate a proton to practically the speed of light. So it can make the trip a lot faster. So if you can send a proton ahead of you that can do a thing, then, or in this case, it was used for communication because it has a quantum entanglement with another proton. So it was used for communication in real time. So things like that, so that was described in that book. So what if there was something like that, either a single quantum entangled, particle, or even molecule, or even, chain of molecules or something? What kind of influence could that have, or even in another way, like a waveform that has the effect to change our cognition in some way, maybe induce some sort of evolution, or induce even a thought. What if it is just, or even from the future, if you couldn't send, that's another thing, time travel, right? We think about time travel being like sending back a ship or a body or a thing. What if it's only a signal or a wave, or, an electron that hits a certain person at a certain time and causes them to make this decision over that decision or something, like, what do we think about for the parameters of influence? So I think, the wider we spread those parameters, the less likely, what I'm just talking about, how would we know that we were influenced by a wave, a cognition wave, or an electron that changed our thought pattern, or any of those things? We wouldn't, right? So, currently we consider the parameters of influence on the perceptive scale, because what else would we do, right? But I'm just saying that it's possible that we've already been affected by another intelligence or ourselves from the future, and would have no way of knowing ever, because it only affected some of our cognition, or even maybe just people who are on a lot of psychedelics or what have you. People that are only in a certain mindset received some thought, right, that led us down a path. So that's maybe a possibility, that we've already been influenced by another intelligence and just would have no way of knowing, and we never will, because it's outside of their ability to affect us in any other way. So I think that's a fascinating thought. The other thing that I'd like to talk about real quick is, maybe not real quick, something that Stephen Greer talks about sometimes is, and I don't remember what he called it, I could have looked this up beforehand, but I didn't, so my apologies, but he talks about technology that is capable of interacting with the human nervous system. And I kind of looked into this for another reason, which again, I'll talk about this more in another video, because this technology could be responsible for a myriad of things that are happening in the world. But for the purposes of this video, I just, in the same context of like, what is influence? I just want to talk about something that I kind of think about. There's a lot of people that have anecdotal experiences of telepathy or telepathy-like experiences. And even I've had similar things. And probably most people have. You think about someone right before they call you on the phone, or, you have a sudden like anxiety, or you have some emotion that you can't understand, and then you find out something terrible or something really crazy or exciting happened to one of your close relatives or loved ones. These things I think happen because we have, brainwaves. We even have, and I have a graphic here, this EEG machine, the electroencephalocardiogram. My God, I have to look. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to look up that word again. I feel bad for not saying it correctly if I didn't. Electroencephalogram. Is that what I said? Okay. All right. The electroencephalogram, as I have on the screen here, is a monitor system that uses various sensors around your skull to monitor your brain waves. And just, we have, every time we have a thought or anything that happens in our mind, it sends out a signal because it is an electromagnetic operation. And I prepared a couple of slides to talk about that. So here is some nerve cells here. There's a couple different types. One is clearly, the bottom one is a motor neuron, which means that it is connects from your nervous system to your muscle cells. And the top one is a interneuron, which means that it is just connected from one neuron to the next, and is the bulk of our nervous system is that, and then the motor neurons are the ones that connect to our muscles. So the important thing about this is that they connect in a chain, as is on the screen there. So they go from the nerve down the down the axon there to the synapse, where it transmits that signal to the next nerve, and so on. And how it is transmitted is there are, these, they use neurotransmitters. So that's what's between those terminals, between each like nerve cell and the next one there, and those synapses. But the thing that triggers those is electrical charge. And so as you can see here in the center of this picture, there's a voltage gated sodium channel, which means that when that signal comes in from one side, it changes the voltage in the main body of the nerve cell, and then sends that signal down the axon in what's called something called the action potential, or the axon. I don't remember all the terminology, but it sends that signal, and it changes the voltage. Okay, so what that means is that as a result, there's an electromagnetic thing that happens. So every time signals go down a nerve cell, that radiates some sort of electromagnetic field. And that's what the EEG machine picks up. And so, it's conceivable that a brain could pick up that electromagnetic signal from another brain at a distance. Now, why that doesn't happen all the time is because that electromagnetic signal is so diminished by the time it even just gets out of our head a few feet that it's very unlikely that that's going to be picked up. So I don't really know if it's a function of that or whether there's some sort of, we actually develop some sort of like quantum entanglement around other brains that we spend a lot of time around or just become familiar with. And that's kind of what happens. We don't understand the whole depths of consciousness yet. So, that's that's still, you know, elusive to us. But, you know, it's possible that, you know, and that's why I think on psychedelics, or, you know, when people are really good at meditating, you're able to sufficiently lower the activity in your brain such that, if you will, the noise is quiet enough that you might perceive outside signals. Now, I'm a little bit back and forth on how I think this works, because to me, like, you know, that signal might be able to be picked up, but it doesn't induce the neural activity, right? It doesn't create that signal within our own brain. It doesn't create that. So whether or not we can pick it up like a radio signal, that would be what's happening if that is indeed true, and how that might work. But the other thing that I'd like to talk about is, you know, and this is kind of what Stephen Greer's discussion is about. Excuse me, sorry about that. Is that technology that can interact with the nervous system. And I looked into this, and there is indeed a way to do that. And it is pulsed microwaves. There's some other people, you can look this up. There's a few people that have talked about this in various videos, and they don't really talk much about how it works. But, you know, and I'll actually go more into depth about this in another video that isn't specifically about UFOs. It'll be just about this other thing. But I want to, you know, what I was just talking about with the charges of the nervous is, you know, how that works is essentially a chemical electrical system. And so that happens at pulses, you know, in our own body. Our nervous system, as shown here, you know. Hello, this is me from the future. I just cut a section out here where I made some very amateur statements about the nervous system. They were a little misleading. So even though I just wanted to come back in and say the thing that I should have said, which was that if you really want to understand the nervous system, you should look it up and read some articles about it, because I am not a neurologist, and my understanding is only so far as the interaction that electricity has, which is still a very amateur novice level. So I just wanted to come in and say that because there will be an abrupt cut to the next part of this video. So thanks for watching. All right, so the next thing that I want to talk about, or at least in this, the next thing to understand. So the nervous system operates in a chemical electrical way. Microwaves. If you've ever put a coffee cup that has a silver rim or a fork or any kind of metal in a microwave, you've probably seen it spark a whole bunch. All right, well, that's because microwaves induce current in ionic compounds and liquids. So what that means is microwave energy can create a charge in whatever, you know, it's essentially conductive. So like metals, and then, you know, ionic liquids. So that's conductive liquid. So, you know, I'll get more into the specifics about this, because there are some pretty detailed things that I can show people about this technology, or at least the origins of it. I can't say what is actually like devices that do this nowadays. I just understand the basics of the technology, and, you know, and that's the information I have. I don't know how this is put to use. So that's what I'll get to in a second. My speculation about that. So, you know, okay, if you think about, again, the nervous system. So the whole system is a series of those nerve cells that, if a charge is changed in it, it will send the signal out and have it go down the line. And so you can do that with very specific frequencies, and microwaves don't always burn. You know, we think about it as like, you know, microwave energy will, like, you know, you can burn or, you know, it's like a death beam or whatever. And that, you know, that is definitely, you know, at higher amperages and, you know, basically higher power levels. So the more energy put into it, the more destructive it could be on flesh or wood or, you know, whatever, anything really metal. All these things, it induces current and heat. But, you know, in smaller amplitudes, it can affect the nervous system. So, with the correct amplitude and frequency, that will cause the nervous system to respond in the way that will affect part of your body. And so, in the document that I had read where I learned about this, it mentions a few frequencies, one that can like stun a person, or one that can cause them to fall over, or one that can cause them to like twitch in various parts of their body. So you can get pretty specific with it. And I imagine they have, because the paper that I read was research that was done in the 70s or maybe even 60s. So this technology has been being developed for a long time. And so this comes to my speculation part, because I don't have any proof of this, but, the ability to use technology to manipulate the nervous system externally. And it can do so with microwaves, because if you get specific enough and you can induce the right current and not current, but frequency in the nervous system, you could do things with any part of the body or even in the mind, because that's what the EEG machine would be able to tell, is what frequencies happen with various thoughts. So if you're able to induce that frequency, you might be able to induce that thought or a different thought or whatever, so maybe a visual thing. So, that's my speculation, is that we can't even trust our own perception because of this technology. There's a lot of stories about, alien entities walking towards people and they have like a wand in their hand or some kind of like thing. That could be a microwave emitter that causes a person to hallucinate and see this person as a different type of being, or even just distort their perception of the being such that they can't identify it as a human, or, a myriad of other things. They talk about being stunned by this device, or, when they're in proximity of a ship or something like that. This could be this technology, I have no idea what the capabilities could be of this thing, especially because we've been working on it for, decades. Who knows what the capabilities of something like this could be, or, even let's say it's not, maybe it's not our technology. What would be the capabilities of a more advanced civilization? Because I found this, that humans do. We have this capability. I don't know how advanced it is, but it's more advanced than just making your arm twitch or making you blank out for a second. That's what they were doing back in the 60s or whatever. So it might be as advanced as they can literally create a vivid hallucination or a person appear before you and talk to you. So before we understand the capabilities of human technology and, all of that, I'm skeptical about any experience that we have that is sufficiently strange, because we have the capabilities to induce probably any kind of experience. So that's kind of where I want to land on that, is that until I know what humans are capable of, I'm really hesitant to attribute anything to outside of humanity. Even after the experience I had where I felt that I was communicating with another entity, which again, I'll talk about in another video. But even after that, I'm still not convinced that it's not just us, or even, again, with this kind of thing, knowing that like a microwave frequency, like if we pick that up on like a radio antenna, or, a microwave radio antenna or whatever, it might just seem like static through our technology, through our like signal thing. But maybe that same signal hitting our brain will cause a different experience, or cause us to have a different thought, or, whatever. So, or also like, when there's group hallucinations, perhaps that's just everyone that's in this specific area is affected by the same signal, and then we see a thing, so when those kind of things phase in and out, maybe we're just standing in proximity of the signal that allows us to perceive a thing, or is evoking us to perceive a thing for whatever reason, so maybe we're not being visited by these ships or, other things. I know some of them appear on radar and stuff, so I don't know. Again, I'm skeptical that it's not our technology at this point, but anything that we see or people see as a group could be this kind of frequency induced experience, you know? So I really don't know where to land on the thing myself. Like I said, I am usually, my belief is directly proportional to how much time I spend paying attention to these things. But I'm still, you know, I'm not ready to believe until I know what we're capable of, or until, you know, I have a more meaningful experience, I guess. I don't know. I definitely have some thoughts about that, but, you know, even, like I said, even with my experience, because I'm aware of the potential for manipulation, I can't be sure what I experienced. It just makes me more curious, though. So again, I want to give a huge shout out to everyone out there who's into UFOs and just into the paranormal, or, you know, has interest in anything sufficiently weird. I think that's a great, great thing to have, is curiosity. And we should always look into things that we don't understand and try to understand them. That is the whole, the whole of the knowledge that humans have acquired is through curiosity. And I believe that we'll eventually figure this out as well. And not just, not just a select group of people that have the ability to classify and hide things from the rest of us, but I think we'll advance to a time when we're not so we're not so shitty to each other that we feel like we can't all be part of this grander thing. So, you know, again, shout out to everybody. Thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate it. And if anything I said is sufficiently interesting to you, maybe I'll engage. I don't know. I'm new to this YouTube thing, but I'm definitely interested in understanding more about the world and my experience of it. So thanks again. Shout out. Please check out my other videos if you're interested in other things to do with beliefs. Thanks so much.